Okay, I know what you're all thinking. But Messiah, you promised us Scary Goat Man for 500 subscribers. What's this weeaboo shit? And yeah, you'd be correct. I did say that Satan was on the chopping block for 500 subscribers, but the issue is that entire script came out like hot garbage. I was really dissatisfied with the whole thing, especially since every time I thought I had it finished, I read it again and I really just wasn't satisfied with how the whole thing was turning out. And if a video as comprehensive as this wasn't up to my standards, it's just not good enough to end up on my YouTube channel. Tell that to some of my earlier videos. My apologies folks, but I am rewriting the whole script over again, and delaying its release until such a time as appropriate, i.e. 666 subscribers. Knowing you fuckers, I'll probably reach that number before this video even goes live. Ironically, however, I think the subject I chose to supplant Satan with for my 500 subscriber special may be even more convoluted, yet infinitely more befitting for this channel given my history with Shintoism. With all that being said, I hope you all enjoy today's video. Konnichiwa! Yokoso, ladies and gentlemen of the internet. We have quite a video lined up for you all today, as I am returning to the most successful series of videos I have ever produced on this channel, that being Japanese mythology. The reason for returning to this particular subject is twofold. Number one, holy shit, people are actually watching these videos as reference for college classes? You guys realize I don't have a degree in any of this shit, right? I'm literally just some asshole with a microphone and some reference material, but nevertheless I'm flattered that you guys decided to check out my channel for research purposes. Of all fucking things. Hopefully you were entertained and were able to put that knowledge to some good use. The second reason is because, well, this was indirectly recommended to me by subscriber Glitch Dolphin, who commented on part 3 how he was confused as to how Amaterasu had a lineage which led all the way down to the Imperial Emperor if she wasn't actually shacking up with Tsukiyomi. And so, in an effort to kill two birds with one stone, I decided to do a whole character study into Amaterasu. I recommend that anyone who hasn't watched the Japanese creation stories videos I did about a year ago, go and check those out before proceeding any further, but if you don't want to, I'll summarize. Amaterasu is the matriarchal goddess of Japan and the sun. She was born from the left eye of the 7th generation kami named Izanagi, along with her twin brothers Tsukiyomi and Susanoo, who came out of the god's right eye and nose respectively. Shortly after this, Susanoo acts like a baby, Izanagi banishes him, then fucks off and dies, entrusting the whole pantheon to Amaterasu. Susanoo takes a dump in her chair, then gets banished again, kills the goddess of food, Funny Footman appears, they kill my dad, and Tsukiyomi does literally absolutely nothing. Got that? Well, too bad. You should watch more Messiahs and Mythology and donate to my Patreon so I can afford to feed my editor. He's starving down there. Anyway, let's get back to Amaterasu. So as the goddess of the sun, she is of course responsible for bringing radiance to the earth, which not only allows for the farmers to grow their crops, but also keeps the evil spirits of the night away, as evidenced by the heavenly rock cave myth we covered in part 2 of the Japanese creation story. She is quite literally the physical embodiment of the sun, and her name suggests that this was a role that she was born into. Amaterasu's name comes from the Japanese word Amateru, which roughly translated means shining in heaven. To understand how and why Amaterasu came to prominence in Japan, we must first examine the history of the region during the Bronze Age. Prior to the introduction of, quote, modern agricultural techniques brought into their country by the Yayoi people of the Korean Peninsula, Japan's ethnic population was comprised of tribes of people known as the Jomon. The Jomon were a nomadic people who usually created small settlements between the various mountain regions of Japan. While we don't know too much about their culture or customs, hence why some people think that these statues are aliens, we do know that their population, interestingly enough, was closer genetically to the modern Caucasian than your typical Asian populations. Of course, they were no match for the Yayoi invaders of the Northwest, and nowadays their population has basically been either slaughtered or bred out from the gene pool. Though some Japanese families do retain some of these old physical characteristics such as wider eyes, ever so slightly darker complexions, and a taller height. The Yayoi, on the other hand, are about as Asian as they come. Like I said already, their population mainly hails from Korea and also China. With these new tools and agricultural techniques, the Yayoi people quickly grew from peasant farmers to actual kings within the span of a few generations, as they controlled the bulk of the major food supply. Inarguably, the most prevalent of these rice kingdoms was the Yamato, ruled by their Tenyo, or as we may know him, Emperor. Now, the first emperor with a distinct possibility of actually existing based on historical evidence is Suijin, who is thought to have ruled from 97 to 30 BC. However, it's far more likely that there was a long line of royalty which superseded him, and even according to the mythological account, he was only the 10th emperor of Japan. This is all neither here nor there, as all we really care about is Amaterasu's rise in popularity, which can be directly attributed to the rise in popularity of rice in Japan, as, well, the sun is necessary to grow rice. You fucking idiot. In fact, while most of the world knows the island nation as Japan, in Asian territories it's known as either Nippon or Nihon, both of which translate to the sun's origin, making obvious reference to how the land lies east of China and how, of course, Japan lies to the east of, well, pretty much everything. Though it's not totally outside the realm of possibility that Amaterasu's prevalence in the region directly correlates to the nation's naming convention. Whatever the case may be, like the pharaohs of Egypt, the emperors of Japan claimed legitimacy to their throne through nepotism, as they were all supposedly direct descendants of the sun goddess, which brings us back to that unanswered question which inspired this whole video. So who were the progenerates of Amaterasu's lineage, if not Tsukuyomi as proclaimed by the Imperial Prince Tenari and the Nihon Shoki? Well, there are two answers for that, which are both complicated by the fact that traditionally Amaterasu is a virgin. Always has been. There's the traditional account of the Kojiki, which we'll be getting into here in just a sec, but there's also the very, very flimsy account given to us by Chinese explorers who noted that curiously throughout the 1st to 3rd centuries AD, the tribal groups of Japan were usually led by women, who also doubled as shamanistic religious leaders. The first ruler of Japan was supposedly somebody by the name of Queen Himiko, whose name literally translates to sun-daughter. Now, let's run down the legend of Himiko, and I want you guys who watch the creation story myth to tell me if any of this sounds familiar. So, she was an unnamed virgin who was murdered by her impudent younger brother, who was killed by shoving a looming shuttle into her... Oh. Well, shit. So if these accounts are to be believed, Amaterasu was actually a real person whose tragic life story was adopted into actual Shinto mythology, with a slight deviation where the sun more than likely was projected as a deity through primitive animism rather than actual personification. Keep in mind, though, these records supersede the Kojiki's publication by about 500 years, and if society was as matriarchal as the Chinese described it, then it's definitely not out of the realm of possibility that Amaterasu's position in the pantheon, as well as her unspoiled nature, come from the same culture which propagated the importance of the female figure. While this is all very interesting, we still need to keep in mind that this is basically a story recounted to us by the Chinese, and not directly from the people of Nippon themselves. And it's entirely possible that the idea of a matriarchal figure ruling over heaven, ironically enough, could have originated in the early Chinese belief system. That's a video for another time, however. Today we just want to hear the story straight from the Japanese. That account, of course, comes to us in the passages of the Kojiki, as well as an explanation of how she was able to procreate without the need for the dirty deed. Done dirt cheap, if you prefer. And really, it was hiding in plain sight the whole time. You guys remember those 5 gods Susanoo created out of Amaterasu's Magatama bead necklace given to her by her father? Oh wow, you don't? Shit, maybe you should have watched these. It's almost like I ordered these on a playlist in a very specific order for that very purpose. Well, aside from giving us incredibly uncomfortable imagery such as a male kami passing babies out of his urethra, it also provides us the origin story to Amaterasu's son. Okay, let me get out the goofy reading face for this one. Very good, that's up. Alright. So her son's name is Amen Ushiho Mimi, which literally translates to ruling rice ears of heaven. Again, going back to the theme of the rice kingdoms. But he also goes by another name, which is worthy of this channel's very first goofy milkman face. Masakatsu Akasu Kachi Haya Hi Ame no Oshiho Mimi. Which... which translates to, truly winning, I have won with rushing might, ruling grand rice ears of heaven. Imagine putting that shit on your birth certificates. Anyhow, that guy is the adopted son of Amaterasu, who claims that he is her legitimate child despite passing through Susanoo's system because, again, she's a dirty cheater. So, what does this tell us? Well, technically speaking, the emperors of Japan are only tangentially related to Amaterasu and are actually closer to the god of storm, Susanoo. What this also tells us is that not only does Tsukiyomi not have jack shit to do with anything according to the Kojiki, he was actually cucked by his own brother out of his sister, if the professed marriage stated in the Hongi is to be believed, even though it shouldn't, while simultaneously absolving the incest issue from the 8th generation of the Mikoto lineage and preserves Amaterasu's virginity. If you're still confused, imagine how I felt researching for this video. Tip jar's right over there. Now, we could go into some of the mythos of how Amaterasu supposedly aided her progeny in rising to power and kicking Susanoo's kid off the throne of a major Japanese territory, though I'd rather save those stories for another time, as there is quite a bit of meat to slice into there. So instead, let's talk about the Imperial Regalia. Wow, I actually said that correctly. AKA the 3 sacred treasures, AKA Sanshu no Jinji. If you've already subjugated yourself to the previous 3 videos I did on this channel focusing on Japanese mythology, you may be able to recognize 2 of these 3 items. The first is the sword Kusanagi no Sorugi, or humorously, Grass Cutter, the most unintimidating name ever for a sword, which was retrieved from one of the tails of the 8-headed serpent Susanoo slayed, and then he gave to his sister as a reconciliation gift, which left their relationship tenuous at best. The sword, because of the heroic undertaking Susanoo had to endure in order to procure it, and because it's a warrior's weapon, is attributed to the virtue of valor in Japanese culture. The second item is the mirror used to blast Amaterasu's own radiance back at her face as she emerged from the heavenly rock cave, allowing for the hand-strength male deity, that's still a stupid name, to grab her by the wrist and return light to the world. This mirror is known as Yata no Kagami, which means the 8-ta mirror, in reference to its octagonal shape. Ta just means side. The mirror represents one of 2 possible things. Either wisdom, which presumably is described to it by the wisdom of the plan hatched by the gods to lure Amaterasu out and bring light and radiance back to the world. Either that, or it takes the far more traditional route and is meant to represent truth, as the ancient Japanese believed that mirrors are the most perfectly honest and objective beings ever, only reflecting that which is shown to them. The third and final object is one I haven't mentioned yet, and that is the Yasakani no Magatama, which shares some of the closest ties to Amaterasu of all the sacred treasures, as Magatama are ancient status symbols for Japanese royalty dating back to the late Jomon period in history, and all the way back to at least Izanagi in the mythology. Now, while they played a small decorative role in the plan to retrieve Amaterasu out of the heavenly rock cave, the one ascribed to be the third of the sacred treasures is a parting gift from Amaterasu to her grandson Ninigi as he descended to Earth, bringing with him divine order and, say it with me ladies and gentlemen, rice. Because of its ties to Japanese divinity and royalty alike, the jewel is thought to represent benevolence in Japanese society. Now, supposedly, these 3 sacred treasures still exist. I say supposedly because they are not on display for the general public to see and are kept hidden within 3 separate shrines in Japan and are only ever joined together by priests when the time comes to crown a new emperor. This photo of the crowning of Emperor Akihito in 1989 demonstrates just that, though as you can clearly see, they are kept under wraps, even during the ceremony. Not that it matters anyway, because with possible exception to the Yasakani no Magatama, these treasures are all likely reproductions of the originals, which we know that the Japanese have been doing since at least the 9th century. That being said, all 3 objects are presented to an emperor at his coronation ceremony, even up until today. The most recent and current emperor of Japan is this fellow by the name of Naruto. Oh, wait, I meant to say Naruhito. Naruhito has been serving as Hokage ever since 2019, and his whole coronation ceremony is actually available for viewing on YouTube, which I recommend you all check out if you have about an hour to kill, as they actually perform this ceremony in its traditional style, and offers us up some of the closest looks we're probably ever going to get of these 3 sacred treasures. I find it fascinating that even in modern day, the influence of Amaterasu can be seen all over Japan, even with the emperor effectively relegated to a figurehead and his divinity stripped away from him. By this guy, no less. Nowhere is this symbolism more obvious than in the Japanese national flag, which is, of course, just a red circle meant to represent the sun. By the way, the imperial flag was cooler, but they were acting out, so Big Daddy USA showed up and showed them the real power of the sun. Twice. And then promptly adopted them. And that's the video, folks. This was a real blast to make, at least for me. I don't know about Mr. Editor. I honestly think that the channel is long overdue for some Japanese mythology related content, because honestly, I love the Shinto religion. I love Japan. I love Japanese people, particularly their women. In fact, I love Japan so much that hopefully we lift international restrictions on them so that they can remilitarize and join the United States and England as we pull out of the UN, glass all our enemies, and establish ourselves as the 3 major superpowers of the world. Or, you know, something like that. Thank you to everybody for watching, and hey, if you're new to the channel, I'd love to see you back here again, so why not subscribe? Like the way this video turned out and want to help me keep my editors fed while they're locked up in my fruit cellar? Consider donating to the Patreon like these names over here, and I'll promise I'll whip them a little harder so that we can get more content out in a far more reasonable amount of time. As always, if you have any suggestions for a future video, leave it in the comments section down below and I just might make it happen. Join the Discord to stay up to date with all my future projects, and hey, until next time, I hope you all have a God's blessed day. Oh yeah, I almost forgot to mention that Glitch Dolphin also wanted me to do a mythological character study on his dad. I was about to make some sort of smart-ass comment about if he wants to learn about his dad, his mother should have just ordered a DNA test. But then I read into this request a little bit more and noticed something. So my first instinct was to type lol okay because I'm white as fuck, but that could also be read as loloke, depending on the formatting. L comes after K in the alphabet, and what letter comes before K? J! Switch out the L's for the J, and what do you get? JoJo. This must be some kind of clue. Wait a second. Glitch Dolphin? Of course! He didn't want me to look into his actual biological father. He wanted me to look into his fantasized daddy. There's only one JoJo bold enough to stick his phallus into a dolphin. Renowned marine biologist Jotaro Kujo. And how did Jotaro earn his doctorate? By writing a thesis on starfish while visiting the small town of Morio. In Japan! And what other video has he requested before? More Japanese mythology. Coincidence? I think not. Let's dig a little deeper, shall we? What about the glitch part of his name? You thought I'd forget all about that, didn't you? Perhaps Glitch Dolphin is actually a dolphin-human hybrid with the glitch in his system being the fact that he is in fact part Japanese. I'm not done. Has anyone ever actually seen Glitch Dolphin's hands? Of course not. That's because he doesn't have hands. He's a dolphin. Oh, but Messiah, if he doesn't have hands, as you postulate in a cocaine-induced rage, then how did he type these comments? Simple! He used his feet. Remember, he's part Japanese, too. And you know what kind of porn is especially popular in Japan? Foot fetish. So that makes him a dolphin on legs, meaning that he can both swim in the ocean and walk on dry land. Maybe even on stones? Perhaps stones in an ocean? A stone ocean? That's it! It all makes sense now! Glitch Dolphin is the literal spawn of Jotaro Kujo! But this entire time we were assuming that he was male, when in fact, he is actually Part 6's protagonist, Jolene Kojo. And her motivation in commenting on these videos wasn't to see more mythological content, but to confirm to us that JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Part 6 Stone Ocean is in fact coming very soon. But that's just the cocaine talking. There's no way that— oh shit!